There were several guys in the Nuremberg Paratrooper Association that had jumped on Crete. One of them, Willy Gestenberger, the guy that was POW'd in Texas, I remember him telling me, we sat in the train and he talked about training, and he said that he'd come back from combat and la-di-da, and he told me that he got to shoot the FG-42. And the other guys were saying, well, I never got to see that. I never got to shoot that. And he said, well, when they were training me, reorient me for combat after convalescence, he said, I got to shoot the FG-42, which is a very rare German paratrooper rifle. They only made 7,000 of them. If anybody has one, I'll buy it from you. Billy told me that when they jumped on Crete, he and another guy were the last guys out of the stick. He said everybody in the stick landed in the valley, and he and his buddy landed up against the side of the mountain. And he said right after they parachuted in, he said the New Zealanders were dropping mortars on him, and his buddy got hit. And he went over to help his buddy, and he said another mortar went off, and it hit him in the arm, and he was gravely wounded. Cretan people took those two German paratroopers and put them in a cave and cared for them for like a week. They nursed them back to life. I know that there were instances on Crete where the Cretans killed the German paratroopers if they got the chance. But in this case, they nursed them back to life. And I remember him telling me that he and his buddy were laying in this cave. He said they were in bad shape. They had infections from their wounds, and they don't know if they're going to make it. He said all of a sudden these New Zealand soldiers stormed into the cave. And he said, it's like they were going to shoot them, and all of a sudden they realized these guys are in bad shape, and so they said, we're going to go get help for you. And Billy told me, he said, and they never came back. They never brought help. And then he said, I wonder if our guys killed them or what happened to them. Billy told me that they went to Africa, and that he talked about being in a convoy, and British fighter planes kept strafing the convoy, and everybody would jump from the truck and try and get away from the vehicles, get away from the road. And he talked about jumping off the truck, and he said he always landed on his bad arm and how bad it hurt him. And one time he pulled up his sleeve and he showed me, and there basically wasn't any muscle left about right here. It was just bone. I don't see how anything down here still worked, because all this was just gone. It was incredible. I mean, that mortar tore him up. He told me that when Africa was fixing to fall, that he was tasked with getting the parachutes out, that somebody had to fly with the parachutes back to the mainland in Europe, that they couldn't leave the parachutes in Africa. Apparently the soldiers could fight to the end or be captured. That was okay, but the parachutes had to be saved. And he said that he was put on a Tantayu, the German transport plane, and he said he was in charge of all the German parachutes, getting them back to Italy. Willy Gestenberger, he was quite the gentleman. I tell you what, he was a very nice man. He had been interned in Mahia, Texas, and a German film crew came over, a guy named Thomas Mausbach, and they were wanting to film. And about 20 years ago, when the guys were still alive, I knew a lot of Americans and Germans, veterans, and this German film crew would call me and they'd say, we're doing a film on whatever battle. You know any guys? And I'd go through and say, these men are Americans and these men are Germans, and contact them, and they'll give you interviews. It worked out quite well for them. So they wanted to film about POW camps in Texas, so they came to Texas with the film crew, and I drove them down to Mahia, Texas. And I'd called the camp beforehand and told them that we were coming. Mahia was a POW camp, but it is currently a state-run facility for, I believe, the insane. So I called ahead to the camp at Mahia and told them that I was bringing a German film crew, and they wanted to talk to some camp guards. And so they had sent out some telephone calls, and some camp guards came in and they hung out that day, and we met them. And I tell you, there's a couple of barracks that they saved. They've preserved them to be the way that they were when the Germans lived in them. And then in the officers' quarter there, I guess the officers' club, the Germans had built a fireplace out of indigenous stone, which was quite beautiful, and they still have it there. And in the barracks, the Germans would paint hunting scenes on the wall, and they cut those hunting scenes out of the barracks and brought them in and put them under glass in like a little museum there. So the main guard building had been demolished, and we walked over to it, and there were pieces of linoleum. And so I picked up a piece of linoleum from the floor from the main guard hut, and I mailed that to Willy Gerstenberger, telling him, Willy, I'm sorry that you didn't get to come see the POW camp, but here's a piece of your POW camp. And I forget who it was, but one of his relatives told me that the letter arrived in the afternoon and that he had died the morning that the letter arrived, so he never saw it.